It's fully dark, and you can't see your own hand in front of your face. Somewhere close, grass moves that shouldn't be moving, and your heart is already pounding before your mind catches up to why. You're 100,000 years ago, lying on open ground with nothing above you but stars. Somewhere out there, something with better eyes than yours is already awake, already hunting. A lion doesn't need moonlight to find you. A hyena doesn't need it either. Their eyes are built with a mirror behind the retina that catches every scrap of light and throws it back through a second time. Yours aren't. You have none of that. In true darkness, your eyes are painfully outmatched, and every sound out there could be nothing at all, or could be the last thing you ever hear. Most other great apes solve this problem by climbing. Chimpanzees, orangutans, and most nights even gorillas build a fresh nest of bent branches high in the canopy and sleep out of easy reach. Out of a predator's reach means out of danger. At some point, our ancestors climbed down, laid their bodies flat on open ground, in the dark, in a world full of teeth, and never went back up. That decision should have ended us. Instead, it's part of the reason we're here at all. The answer involves a mirror we don't have in our eyes, an ember someone refused to let die, and a second sleep almost none of us remember we used to take. Let's get into it. Start with the uncomfortable biology. Behind the retina of a cat, a deer, or a hyena sits a mirror of tissue called the tapetum lucidum, bouncing light back through the eye a second time, which is why their eyes seem to glow in a flashlight beam. Humans don't have one. We never did. Our eyes were built for a bright daytime world, not for tracking a predator moving through grass at 2 a.m. Layer onto that the fact that we're slow, clawless, and built with soft skin instead of hide, and the math gets worse. A hyena's bite can crack bone. Our best natural weapon is a fingernail. So what would you do, built like that, with night coming on? So most of our closest primate relatives made the obvious choice: get off the ground. A chimpanzee or an orangutan builds a brand new nest almost every single night of its life, bending branches into a platform 30, sometimes 80 feet in the air, likely to keep whatever hunts on the ground from reaching them. Even gorillas, heavy enough that adult males often bed down at the base of a tree, still keep their most vulnerable members, the infants and juveniles, up in the branches. Somewhere in our own lineage, that stopped. Researchers studying the deep history of human sleep still debate exactly when and why, but the outcome isn't in dispute. Our ancestors started sleeping flat on the earth, in the open, in the dark, night after night, in landscapes that also belonged to lions. A night-blind primate, lying down, on the ground, on purpose. That should not have worked. So what changed? Not better eyes, not sharper claws. Something you could hold in one hand. It worked because of one technology, older than almost anything else we've ever made. A fire that didn't go out. At Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, researchers have identified burned bone and ash deep inside the cave, in chambers sunlight never reaches and lightning could never start a blaze in. That depth is the key detail. It means the fire didn't start there on its own. Someone carried it in. The evidence now points to fire use stretching back as far as 1.8 million years, among some of the earliest members of our genus, long before our own species even existed. They likely weren't striking sparks from scratch. They were almost certainly doing something harder in a different way, catching a flame from a natural source, a lightning strike, a smoldering log, and refusing to let it die. Think about what that actually requires. Fire doesn't tend itself. Someone has to feed it, all night, every night, for it to still be alive by morning. That's not a one-time invention. That's a commitment, repeated for hundreds of thousands of years, by people who understood, without ever writing it down, that the ember was one of the only things standing between the group and whatever was circling the dark just past the light. And once that fire was reliable, it changed the entire equation. Fire doesn't guarantee safety, but a wall of light and heat and unfamiliar smell makes most predators far more cautious about closing the distance. A night-blind primate with no claws and no mirror in its eyes suddenly had something none of its cousins in the trees had: a perimeter. For the first time, it was possible to lie down on open ground in the dark and reasonably expect to see the sunrise. That single ember didn't just keep bodies warm. It's very possibly one of the biggest reasons we ever left the trees at all. But the strangest thing fire gave humans wasn't protection from predators, it was time. Once the fire made nighttime survivable, something else happened that had nothing to do with survival at all. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent decades recording conversations among the Jew/Hawansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, and she noticed something strange. Daytime conversation and nighttime conversation were almost two different languages. During the day, talk centered on practical things: complaints, work, disputes over resources, the business of staying fed. But once the fire was lit and the sun was down, the entire tone of the group shifted. Firelit conversation turned towards stories, myths, histories of distant relatives, tales about the dead, the spirit world, and distant kin the listeners had never met. Her research suggested something remarkable: that firelight itself may have created the conditions for human culture to exist at all. Darkness ends the day's work. It removes faces you can clearly read and replaces them with a small circle of firelit ones, gathered close, with nowhere else to be and nothing left to do but talk. Wiesner argued that this nightly ritual, repeated for hundreds of thousands of years, was where a huge share of human imagination, empathy, and shared identity was actually built. Not in daylight doing chores, in the dark, around an ember. So the night that should have killed us didn't just get survived, it got used. It became the one part of the day already carved out for nothing but story, memory, and the people sitting closest to you. But fire didn't just change what happened around the flames. There's evidence it may have rewired something happening hours later, in the middle of the night, that you've probably felt yourself without ever knowing why. And here's the twist almost nobody expects, because it isn't really ancient at all. Historian Roger Ekirch spent years combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from before artificial lighting existed, and he found the same pattern described over and over, in language so casual it was clearly considered completely normal. People didn't sleep through the night in one block. They had a first sleep several hours after dark, and then woke wide awake for an hour or more in the dead of night. That waking window had a name and a purpose. People used it to pray, talk quietly with a partner, tend the fire, or simply lie in the dark thinking, before drifting into a second sleep until morning. It wasn't a disorder, it was ordinary. And this isn't just something historians found buried in old diaries. A clinical sleep study in the 1990s stripped modern volunteers of artificial light for weeks at a time, and their sleep patterns shifted towards something resembling this same ancient rhythm: a first sleep, a quiet waking hour, a second sleep, as if the body still remembered a world lit only by fire and stars. The pattern only vanished once artificial light stretched the usable day long past sunset and erased the need for that middle-of-the-night pause entirely. Which means if you've ever woken at 3 a.m. for no reason at all, lay there for a while, and eventually drifted back off, you weren't broken. You were doing something people did for most of human history, on a body clock built for a world with only firelight and stars. So of the three things that got us through the night, the ember, the stories, the second sleep, which one actually mattered most? The honest answer might surprise you. None of them alone. That's the honest answer. So why did a night-blind, clawless primate ever climb down out of the trees and lie down in the dark? Not because the danger disappeared. It never fully did. It's because, piece by piece, that danger got managed. With an ember, someone refused to let go out. With a circle of firelight that likely kept teeth at a more cautious distance. And eventually, with a nightly ritual, built around that same fire that had nothing left to do with survival at all. The night didn't just get endured, it got claimed. It became the one part of the day where the stories got told, where the group became a community instead of just a collection of bodies working through daylight hours. And, if the sleep research holds up, where the mind got a quiet hour to itself before the second half of the night began. We tend to imagine early humans as most vulnerable after dark. In a lot of ways, they were. But that vulnerability is also, very possibly, the exact reason we ended up with fire, with language rich enough for myth, and with a species that needed each other enough to gather close and stay that way until morning. The dark didn't just test us, it's part of what built us. If you enjoyed uncovering the real history hiding in the hours after sunset, subscribe to Ancient Actually. Every week, we separate myth from evidence and reveal the remarkable ways ancient people survived a world that was far harsher than most of us can imagine. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about discovering why it happened and what it can still teach us today.